Marcus Chen had built his technology empire from nothing. Starting with a small software company in his garage 15 years ago, he now controlled Dataflow Industries, one of the largest data processing companies in the country. His servers handled information for banks, hospitals, government agencies, and major corporations. At 42, Marcus was known for his sharp mind and even sharper business instincts. The rain pounded against the windows of his corner office on the 40th floor as Marcus reviewed the quarterly reports. His company processed over 2 billion data transactions daily, and the numbers looked impressive. But something had been bothering him for weeks. Small inconsistencies in the data patterns, tiny glitches that his automated systems flagged but couldn't explain. Sarah Martinez, his chief technology officer, knocked on his door. "Marcus, we need to talk about those anomalies you've been tracking." Marcus looked up from his screens. Sarah had worked with him for 8 years and rarely looked worried. Today, concern was written all over her face. "What did you find?" Marcus asked, gesturing for her to sit. "The patterns are definitely artificial. Someone is using our systems to process data that doesn't match normal business operations. The volume is massive, and it's coming through government channels." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. His company had several contracts with federal agencies for routine data processing. Nothing classified, just administrative work like payroll systems and basic record keeping. At least that's what he thought. "Show me the specifics," he said. Sarah pulled up her laptop and connected it to the wall display. Rows of data flowed across the screen, but certain entries were highlighted in red. "These transactions happen every Tuesday and Friday at exactly 3:17 a.m. They process for exactly 47 minutes, then stop. The data is heavily encrypted, far beyond what we see from other government clients." Marcus studied the patterns. The timing was too precise to be coincidental, and the encryption level suggested something far more sensitive than payroll processing. "Do we know which agency is running these jobs?" "That's where it gets interesting. The authorization codes trace back to a Department of Defense subdivision that officially doesn't exist. I've tried researching it, but I hit dead ends everywhere." The room fell silent except for the rain against the windows. Marcus had always prided himself on knowing exactly what his company was handling. The idea that someone was using his systems for unknown purposes made him deeply uncomfortable. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "I found fragments of unencrypted data that leaked through during one of the processing sessions. It appears to be surveillance information, names, locations, movement patterns of civilians." Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Millions of people going about their daily lives, unaware that their information might be flowing through his servers. "Are you saying our government is spying on its own citizens using our infrastructure?" "I'm saying someone is, and they're using our systems to do it without our knowledge or consent." The weight of the situation began to settle on Marcus. If this information became public, it would destroy his company and potentially land him in prison. But if he ignored it, he would be complicit in whatever was happening. "We need more information before we do anything," Marcus said. "Can you dig deeper without alerting whoever is running these operations?" Sarah nodded. "I can try, but we need to be careful. If they realize we're looking into this, it could get dangerous." Over the next 3 days, Marcus found it difficult to focus on normal business operations. He attended meetings and made decisions, but his mind kept returning to the mysterious data processing sessions. He barely slept, spending his nights researching government surveillance programs and data collection methods. On Thursday evening, as Marcus was preparing to leave the office, his security guard called from the lobby. "Mr. Chen, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent." "Did they give a name?" "Colonel James Parker. Says he's with military intelligence." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Had they discovered Sarah's investigation? "Send him up." Minutes later, Marcus watched through his office window as a tall man in civilian clothes stepped out of the elevator. Even without a uniform, everything about him screamed military. His posture was perfectly straight, his movements precise and economical. He appeared to be in his early 50s with graying hair and sharp, observant eyes. Marcus opened his office door before the man could knock. Colonel Parker? Mr. Chen, thank you for seeing me on short notice. His voice was calm and measured, revealing nothing about his intentions. They shook hands, and Marcus noticed the colonel's grip was firm but not aggressive. Please have a seat. What can I do for you? Colonel Parker remained standing and glanced around the office, taking in the layout and the various screens displaying company data. I believe you've been asking questions about certain data processing activities on your servers. Marcus kept his expression neutral, though his heart was racing. I'm not sure what you mean. Mr. Chen, I'm not here to threaten you or your company. Quite the opposite, actually. I need your help. This wasn't what Marcus had expected. My help with what? Colonel Parker finally sat down, his posture remaining perfectly straight. What you've discovered in your systems is part of a surveillance operation, but it's not authorized by any legitimate government agency. The room seemed to spin around Marcus. What are you talking about? There's a group within our intelligence community that's gone rogue. They're using your infrastructure to conduct illegal surveillance on American citizens. I've been investigating them for months, but I need access to the data they're processing to build a case. Marcus stared at the colonel, trying to process what he was hearing. Why should I trust you? How do I know you're not part of whatever is going on? Colonel Parker reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin folder. He placed it on Marcus's desk. Because 3 weeks ago they tried to have me killed. Marcus opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were medical records from a military hospital, photos of a car accident, and a police report. According to the documents, Colonel Parker's vehicle had suffered brake failure on a mountain road. Only his military training had kept him from going over a cliff. The brake lines were cut, Colonel Parker said quietly. Professional work, made to look like mechanical failure. Why are you telling me this? Because you're in danger too. Once they realize you've discovered their operation, they'll take steps to protect themselves. That could mean destroying the evidence, shutting down the program, or eliminating anyone who knows about it. Marcus felt the weight of the situation crushing down on him. What exactly are you proposing? A partnership. You help me gather evidence of their illegal activities, and I help you protect your company and your employees. Together we can expose what they're doing and stop them. The office fell silent as Marcus considered the colonel's proposal. Outside, the rain had stopped and the city lights were beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness. Marcus realized that his comfortable, predictable world was about to change forever. He looked at Colonel Parker, seeing determination and integrity in the man's eyes. What would we need to do? Colonel Parker's plan was both simple and dangerous. They would need to access the rogue surveillance data during one of the processing sessions without alerting the operators. This meant Marcus would have to modify his own security protocols to give the colonel backdoor access to the servers. The risk is enormous, Marcus said as they met in a small diner across town the next morning. He had chosen the location carefully, a place where business executives and military officers would never normally cross paths. I understand that, Parker replied, cutting his eggs with military precision. But consider the alternative. If we do nothing, this illegal surveillance will continue to expand. More citizens will be monitored, more data will be collected, and eventually, this group will have enough power to influence elections, blackmail politicians, and control the flow of information in this country. Marcus stirred his coffee, watching the steam rise. How do I know you're really who you say you are? How do I know this isn't some elaborate setup? Parker reached into his wallet and pulled out his military identification, along with several commendation letters and a photograph of himself with the Secretary of Defense. You can verify all of this, make some calls, check my service record. Over. The next 2 days, Marcus did exactly that. He used his connections in the tech industry to quietly investigate Colonel Parker's background. Everything checked out. James Parker was a decorated military intelligence officer with 28 years of service. He had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, received multiple commendations for his work in counterterrorism, and was known for his integrity and dedication to constitutional principles. More importantly, Marcus discovered that Parker had been asking questions about unauthorized surveillance programs for several months. His superiors had grown increasingly uncomfortable with his investigations, leading to his reassignment to a desk job in logistics. The timing aligned perfectly with Parker's story. On Wednesday evening, Marcus made his decision. He called the colonel's secure phone number and said simply, "I'm in." They met again, this time in Marcus's office after hours. Sarah Martinez was there too, having been briefed on the situation. Her technical expertise would be crucial for accessing the surveillance data without leaving traces. "The next processing session is tomorrow night," Sarah explained, pointing to her laptop screen. "It starts at 3:17 a.m. and runs for 47 minutes. We'll have a narrow window to copy the data before it gets encrypted and transmitted." Colonel Parker studied the technical specifications Sarah had prepared. "What kind of information are we likely to find?" "Based on the data fragments I've seen, it appears to be comprehensive surveillance profiles," Sarah replied. "Location tracking, communication monitoring, financial transactions, social media activity, and behavioral analysis. They're building detailed dossiers on thousands of people." "Any idea who they're targeting?" Marcus asked. Parker's expression darkened. "That's what worries me most. From what I've been able to piece together, they're not focusing on foreign agents or suspected terrorists. They're monitoring journalists, politicians, judges, and civil rights activists. People who might pose a threat to their operations." The three of them worked through the night, developing a plan to intercept the data. Sarah would create a hidden partition on the servers that would automatically copy any data processed during the surveillance sessions. The partition would be invisible to normal system scans and would only activate during the specific time windows when the rogue operations ran. Colonel Parker provided insight into military-grade encryption and security protocols, helping them understand how to avoid detection. His knowledge of intelligence operations proved invaluable as they developed countermeasures. At 2:30 a.m. on Thursday night, they were in position. Marcus sat at his main terminal, while Sarah monitored the system architecture from her workstation. Colonel Parker watched the security feeds, ready to alert them if anyone approached the building. "Processing session starting now," Sarah whispered, even though they were alone on the 40th floor. On Marcus's screen, massive amounts of data began flowing through the servers. The volume was staggering, terabytes of information being processed, analyzed, and compiled. Marcus watched in fascination and horror as the hidden partition began copying everything. "My God," Sarah breathed, watching the data streams. "They're processing surveillance information on over 50,000 people." Colonel Parker moved closer to look at the screens. "Can you identify any of the targets?" Sarah pulled up a sample of the intercepted data. Names and profiles began appearing on the screen. Marcus recognized several prominent journalists, 2 federal judges, and a handful of senators from both political parties. "They're building blackmail files," Parker said grimly. "Look at this data. Financial irregularities, personal communications, medical records, family information, everything you'd need to control or destroy someone." As the processing session continued, more disturbing patterns emerged. The surveillance network was far more extensive than they had imagined. It included cooperation from social media companies, telecommunications providers, and financial institutions. The scope was breathtaking and terrifying. "There," Sarah said, pointing to a specific data stream. "That's the command structure. I can trace the authorization codes back to their source." She worked furiously, following digital breadcrumbs through layers of encryption and misdirection. After 30 minutes, she had mapped out the entire organizational structure of the rogue operation. "It's bigger than we thought," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't just a few rogue agents. It's an entire shadow organization. Within the intelligence community, they have people in the CIA, NSA, FBI, and Pentagon." Colonel Parker studied the organizational chart Sarah had assembled. "These names, I recognize some of them. Deputy Director Harrison at the CIA, General Morrison at the Pentagon, Director Walsh at the NSA. These are high-level officials." Marcus felt sick to his stomach. "We're not just dealing with rogue agents, we're dealing with rogue leadership." The processing session ended at exactly 4:04 a.m. just as it had during all the previous sessions. The servers returned to normal operations, leaving no trace of the surveillance activities except for the copies hidden in Sarah's partition. "We have everything," Sarah said, checking the copied files. "Complete surveillance profiles, operational procedures, budget information, and the organizational structure. This is enough evidence to expose the entire operation." But Colonel Parker looked worried. "Now comes the hard part. We need to get this information to people we can trust, and we need to do it before they realize we've discovered their operation." As dawn broke over the city, Marcus realized that their investigation had uncovered something far more dangerous than illegal surveillance. They had discovered a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government, with the power to blackmail and control elected officials, judges, and journalists. "Who can we trust with this information?" Marcus asked. Parker was quiet for a long moment. "That's the problem. We can't be sure how deep this goes. Any of the normal channels could be compromised." Sarah saved the copied data to encrypted drives, creating multiple backups. "We need to be smart about this. If we move too quickly or trust the wrong people, we could end up like the Colonel's breaks." Marcus looked out at the city waking up below. Millions of people starting their day, unaware that their government was spying on them illegally. The weight of responsibility was crushing, but he knew they had to act. "There's someone I might be able to trust," Colonel Parker said finally. "A journalist who's been investigating government overreach for years. Rebecca Stone at the Washington Herald. She's built a reputation for protecting her sources, and she has contacts throughout the intelligence community." "Is she on their surveillance list?" Sarah asked, checking the copied files. Parker's face went pale as he scanned the names. "Yes. She's been under surveillance for 18 months. They have everything. Her communications, her sources, her story leads. If she publishes anything about this operation, they'll know exactly how to discredit her." The room fell silent as the full implications sank in. They had uncovered a massive conspiracy, but the very people they needed to help expose it were already being monitored and controlled by the conspirators. "We need a different approach," Marcus said. "We can't just hand this over to a journalist or a government official. We need to find a way to make this information public that they can't stop or control." Colonel Parker nodded slowly. "You're right. But that means we're going to have to get creative. And dangerous." The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to Marcus's office. Rebecca Stone from the Washington Herald arrived without an appointment, her press credentials displayed prominently on her jacket. She was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in her early 30s, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Mr. Chen, I need to speak with you about some unusual activity in your data processing systems," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Marcus's blood ran cold. If Rebecca Stone knew about their investigation, it meant others probably did too. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Ms. Stone." She pulled out a small digital recorder and placed it on his desk. 3 days ago, someone leaked information to me about illegal surveillance operations being conducted through private data processing companies. Your company was specifically mentioned. Marcus fought to keep his expression neutral while his mind raced. This could be a trap set by the rogue intelligence group, or it could be genuine. "I'm afraid I can't comment on our clients' activities. We have strict confidentiality agreements." Rebecca smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mr. Chen, I've been investigating government surveillance overreach for 5 years. I know when someone is using private companies as a cover for illegal activities. The question is whether you're a willing participant or an unwitting victim." Something in her tone made Marcus reconsider. She didn't sound like she was trying to trap him. She sounded like someone who genuinely wanted to uncover the truth. "What exactly do you think you know?" "I know that certain government agencies are processing surveillance data through your servers without proper authorization. I know that this data includes information on American citizens who are not suspected of any crimes. And I know that someone in your company has been asking questions about these activities." Marcus realized that their investigation hadn't been as secret as they'd hoped. "How did you find out about this?" Rebecca leaned forward. "I have sources throughout the intelligence community. People who believe in the Constitution and are concerned about what's happening to civil liberties in this country. They've been watching this surveillance operation for months, but they needed proof. And you think I can provide that proof? I think you may already have it. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message from Colonel Parker. Emergency meeting. Someone broke into my apartment. They know we're investigating. Marcus looked up at Rebecca, making a decision that would change everything. Ms. Stone, I think we need to talk, but not here and not now. Can you meet me tonight at the Riverside Diner on 5th Street? 8 o'clock. She nodded, pocketing her recorder. I'll be there. And Mr. Chen? Be careful. The people behind this operation don't hesitate to eliminate threats. That evening, Marcus arrived at the diner early, choosing a corner booth where he could watch the entrance. Colonel Parker arrived first, looking more tense than Marcus had ever seen him. His usually perfect posture was slightly hunched, and his eyes constantly scanned the room. They tossed my apartment, Parker said, sliding into the booth. Professional job, but they left just enough disturbance that I'd know they'd been there. It's a message. What were they looking for? Evidence of our investigation. They didn't find anything because I've been keeping all the materials with Sarah, but they know I'm involved now. Rebecca Stone arrived exactly at 8, carrying a small briefcase. She sat down across from them and immediately got to business. Colonel Parker, I presume. My sources told me you've been asking uncomfortable questions about certain surveillance programs. Parker studied her carefully. Your sources? People like you, military and intelligence personnel who joined the service to protect American freedoms, not to spy on American citizens. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. I've been documenting this operation for months, but I've never been able to get inside access to the data processing systems. Marcus looked at the folder. What do you have? Rebecca spread several documents across the table. Financial records, showing unauthorized payments to private contractors. Internal memos discussing the expansion of domestic surveillance capabilities, and testimony from several whistleblowers who were afraid to go public. Parker examined one of the memos. This is from Deputy Director Harrison's office. How did you get this? Someone with access and a conscience slipped it to me. The problem is I need corroborating evidence from the actual surveillance data to make the story stick. Internal memos can be dismissed as forgeries, but the raw data files would be impossible to fake. Marcus made his decision. We have the data. Everything you need to prove this operation exists. Rebecca's eyes widened. You actually accessed their surveillance files? We copied everything during their last processing session, Sarah Martinez said, appearing beside their table. Marcus hadn't seen her come in, but he was relieved she was there. They would need her technical expertise. Sarah sat down and pulled out her encrypted laptop. I've been analyzing the data we captured. The scope is even worse than we initially thought. They're not just collecting information on journalists and politicians. They're monitoring anyone who might potentially oppose their activities. She showed them a breakdown of the surveillance targets. Teachers who had spoken out against government policies, small business owners who had filed complaints against federal agencies, community activists who had organized protests, even some military personnel who had questioned certain orders. This is a police-state operation, Parker said grimly. They're building a comprehensive database of potential dissidents. Rebecca studied the data with professional interest. This is incredible. With this evidence, I can write a story that will expose the entire operation, but we need to be smart about how we release it. What do you mean? Marcus asked. If I just publish this as a regular news story, they'll discredit me and claim the evidence is fabricated. They'll also have time to shut down the operation and destroy evidence. We need to make the information public in a way that they can't control or suppress. Sarah looked up from her laptop. What if we released it simultaneously through multiple channels? Different news outlets, social media platforms, government watchdog groups. Make it impossible for them to contain. That's good, Rebecca said, but we need more than that. We need to ensure that key people in government who aren't part of the conspiracy have access to the evidence before the story breaks. Colonel Parker had been quiet, thinking. There are still people in the intelligence community who would act on this information if they had proof. The problem is identifying who we can trust. I might have a solution, Rebecca said. I have a contact at the Inspector General's office who has been investigating reports of surveillance abuse. He's clean. I've verified his background thoroughly. Marcus felt a spark of hope. Could he act on this evidence? If we provide him with copies of all the surveillance data, along with the organizational structure you've mapped out, he could launch an official investigation that would provide legal cover for exposing the operation publicly. Sarah was already making copies of the encrypted data files. How do we get this to him safely? If they're monitoring communications, they'll intercept any normal transmission. Old school, Parker said. Physical delivery. I can arrange to meet with him in person. Rebecca shook her head. Too dangerous. They're already watching you. If you meet with an Inspector General investigator, they'll know exactly what you're doing. Then how do we make contact? Marcus had an idea. What if we use my company's courier service? We send packages to government agencies all the time as part of our normal business operations. One more delivery wouldn't raise any suspicions. That could work, Sarah said. I can encrypt the data files and embed them in what looks like routine business documents. Unless someone knows exactly what to look for, it would appear to be normal contract paperwork. They spent the next hour working out the details. Sarah would prepare multiple copies of the evidence, encrypted and disguised, as business documents. Marcus would arrange for courier delivery to the Inspector General's office, along with several news outlets and civil liberties organizations. Rebecca would prepare her story for simultaneous publication across multiple platforms, timed to coincide with the delivery of the evidence to official channels. Colonel Parker would use his contacts to alert trustworthy personnel within the military and intelligence communities. There's one more thing we need to consider, Parker said as they prepared to leave. Once this story breaks, we're all going to be targets. They'll try to discredit us, investigate our backgrounds, and possibly take more direct action. Marcus felt the weight of that reality settling on his shoulders. What kind of direct action? Anything from financial pressure and legal harassment to physical threats. These people have already tried to kill me once. They won't hesitate to escalate if they feel cornered. Rebecca closed her briefcase. That's why timing is crucial. Once the information is public and in the hands of multiple government investigators, it becomes much harder for them to take action against us without drawing more attention to the conspiracy. Sarah saved her work and closed her laptop. I'll have everything ready by tomorrow afternoon, but we need to move fast. Every day we wait increases the risk that they'll discover what we're doing. As they prepared to leave the diner separately, Marcus realized that there was no going back. In less than 48 hours, they would either expose one of the largest government conspiracies in American history, or they would become casualties in a shadow war most citizens never knew existed. Are we really doing this? He asked Colonel Parker. Parker's expression was grim but determined. We swore an oath to protect the Constitution, Mr. Chen. Some of us in the military, others in the business world, but we all have a responsibility to defend the freedoms this country was built on. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility. Tomorrow would change everything, not just for them, but potentially for the entire country. Then let's do it. The morning of their planned revelation started with an unexpected phone call. Marcus was in his office at 6 a.m. reviewing the final preparations when his direct line rang. The caller ID showed only numbers, no name. Marcus Chen speaking. Mr. Chen, this is Deputy Director Harrison from the CIA. I believe we need to meet. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Harrison was one of the names they had identified as part of the rogue operation. I'm not sure what we would need to discuss, Deputy Director. Oh, I think you know exactly what we need to discuss. Your company's server logs show some very interesting activity over the past week. Activity that could be misinterpreted by people who don't understand the full scope of national security operations. The threat was clear, though carefully worded. Marcus looked around his office, suddenly aware that Harrison might be watching him somehow. I'm afraid I don't follow. Mr. Chen, let me be direct. You and your associates have accessed classified information without authorization. This is a federal crime that carries serious penalties. However, I'm prepared to offer you an alternative. What kind of alternative? A partnership. Your company becomes an official contractor for our security operations. You receive substantial compensation, government protection, and legal immunity for any past activities. In return, you cooperate fully with our requirements and maintain absolute discretion. About sensitive operations, Marcus felt trapped. Harrison was offering him a way out, but it would mean becoming complicit in the very surveillance operation they were trying to expose. I need time to consider this. You have until 5 p.m. today to decide. After that, the offer is withdrawn, and we pursue other options. I trust you understand what those other options might include. The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at the phone in his shaking hand. Harrison's message was clear. Cooperate or face federal prosecution, financial ruin, or worse. Marcus immediately called Colonel Parker's secure phone. We have a problem. Harrison knows about our investigation. Parker's voice was tense. How much does he know? Enough to threaten me with federal prosecution. He's offering a deal. Make my company an official part of their operation in exchange for immunity. It's a trap, Marcus. Once you're inside their organization, you become a co-conspirator. They'll have leverage over you forever. But if I refuse, they'll come after all of us. They're already coming after us. The question is whether we fight back or surrender. Marcus made his decision. We stick to the plan. How soon can we move? Sarah finished preparing all the evidence packages last night. Rebecca has her story ready for publication. We can execute everything this afternoon. Then let's do it before Harrison's deadline. If we're going to war with these people, we need to strike first. By noon, everything was in motion. Sarah had prepared dozens of encrypted data packages disguised as routine business documents. Marcus's courier service was scheduled to make simultaneous deliveries to the Inspector General's office, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the House Oversight Committee, and offices of the Washington Herald, New York Times, and Wall Street Journal. Rebecca Stone had coordinated with journalists at multiple publications to ensure simultaneous release of the story across all major news platforms. Colonel Parker had alerted his contacts within the military and intelligence communities, preparing them for the revelations that were about to become public. At 2 p.m., Marcus watched from his office window as courier trucks departed from his building, carrying evidence of the conspiracy to locations across Washington, D.C. There was no turning back now. His phone rang again. Sarah's voice was urgent. Marcus, we have a problem. I'm monitoring our server activity and someone is trying to remotely access our systems. They're looking for the evidence files. Can they get to them? Not the encrypted copies, but they might be able to trace our investigation activities. I'm shutting down non-essential systems and implementing emergency security protocols. Marcus felt the walls closing in. Harrison's people were already taking action, trying to destroy evidence and cover their tracks. How long can you hold them off? Maybe an hour, 2 at most. After that, they might be able to access our entire network. Colonel Parker's voice came through on another line. Marcus, I just received word that federal agents are en route to your building. Probable cause warrant for suspected cybercrimes. How long do we have? 20 minutes, maybe less. Marcus made rapid calculations. The courier deliveries were still in progress. Some packages had been delivered, but others were still in transit. If the federal agents seized his servers and arrested his staff, the remaining evidence might never reach its destinations. Sarah, can you trigger a complete data wipe of our investigation files? Already done, but Marcus, if they arrest us before the story breaks, they can claim we destroyed evidence to cover up our own crimes. The elevator chimed, and Marcus saw, through his glass wall as armed federal agents emerged, flashing badges and warrants to his security staff. They moved with military precision, quickly securing the floor and establishing control. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Stone, story going live in all outlets in 15 minutes. Hold tight. Agent Catherine Wells, FBI, entered Marcus's office with 2 other agents. She was professional but clearly in command. Mr. Chen, you're under arrest for unauthorized access to classified computer systems and conspiracy to commit espionage. Marcus stood calmly as they read him his rights. Agent Wells, I think you should know that evidence of government surveillance abuse is being delivered to congressional oversight committees as we speak. Her expression didn't change. Mr. Chen, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use that right. As they led Marcus away in handcuffs, he saw Sarah and several other employees being arrested as well. Colonel Parker was nowhere to be seen, hopefully having escaped before the agents arrived. The FBI transport van was pulling away from the Data Flow Industries building when Marcus's phone, which the agents had confiscated, began buzzing continuously. With news alerts and phone calls, Agent Wells looked at the phone screen and her expression changed. Headlines were appearing across every major news outlet simultaneously. Massive government surveillance conspiracy exposed, and secret program. Monitored thousands of Americans and intelligence officials accused of illegal domestic spying. Rebecca Stone's story had gone live across multiple platforms, complete with detailed evidence from the surveillance files Marcus's team had captured. Other news outlets were confirming the story with their own sources and publishing supporting documents. Marcus watched Agent Wells take a phone call, her face growing more concerned with each passing moment. Yes, sir. I understand. We're bringing him in now. When she hung up, she looked at Marcus with something resembling respect. Mr. Chen, it appears your story is getting a lot of attention. Within an hour of his arrest, Marcus was sitting in a federal holding facility watching news coverage of the scandal on a television in the common area. The evidence he and his team had gathered was being analyzed by news organizations around the world. Congressional leaders were calling for immediate investigations. The Inspector General had announced the launch of a formal inquiry. Most importantly, the surveillance operation had been forced into the open. Deputy Director Harrison had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. General Morrison and Director Walsh were facing congressional subpoenas. The conspiracy was unraveling exactly as they had hoped. Colonel Parker appeared on several news programs as an expert commentator, carefully avoiding mention of his specific role in the Yainberg investigation while providing context about intelligence oversight and constitutional protections. He had managed to avoid arrest and was now serving as a public face for the whistleblower effort. Late that evening, Marcus's attorney, hired by his company's legal department, arrived with unexpected news. The charges against you are being dropped. The Justice Department has determined that your actions constitute protected whistleblowing under federal law. Marcus felt relief flooding through him. What about Sarah and the others? All charges dropped. In fact, the Inspector General's office wants to interview all of you as cooperating witnesses in their investigation. As Marcus was released from custody, he found reporters waiting outside the federal building. Rebecca Stone was among them, along with camera crews from multiple networks. Mr. Chen, do you have any comment on the surveillance scandal you helped expose? One reporter called out. Marcus thought for a moment, considering everything they had risked and accomplished. The American people have a right to know when their government is spying on them illegally. We did what any citizen should do when they discover evidence of constitutional violations. We brought it to light. Are you concerned about retaliation from the intelligence officials you've exposed? The truth is now public. The evidence is in the hands of congressional investigators and the press. It's much harder to retaliate against someone when the whole world is watching. As Marcus walked away from the federal building, he realized that their mission was only partially complete. They had exposed the conspiracy and stopped the immediate surveillance operation, but the deeper work of holding people accountable and reforming the system was just beginning. His phone rang. It was Colonel Parker. Marcus, congratulations, you did it. We did it, all of us together. Marcus looked up at the night sky, feeling both exhausted and energized. But this is just the beginning, isn't it? Yes, it is. The real work starts now. 3 months after the surveillance scandal broke, Marcus Chen found himself sitting in a congressional hearing room, packed with reporters, cameras, and concerned citizens. The House Oversight Committee had been conducting hearings on the illegal surveillance program for weeks, and today Marcus was scheduled to testify about his company's role in uncovering the conspiracy. Chairman Roberts gavelled the hearing to order. Mr. Chen, thank you for appearing before the committee today. Your testimony will help us understand how this surveillance operation was able to function undetected for so long. Marcus adjusted the microphone and looked out at the packed hearing room. Thank you, Chairman Roberts. I want to be clear from the start that my company was an unwitting participant in this operation. We were told we were processing routine administrative data for legitimate government agencies. Over the next 4 hours, Marcus detailed how the surveillance program had used private companies as cover for illegal domestic spying. He explained the technical methods used to hide the true nature of the data processing and described how patterns in the server logs had first alerted his team to suspicious activities. Representative Martinez from California focused on the scope of the surveillance. Mr. Chen, based on the evidence your team gathered, how many Americans were being monitored by this program? Our analysis identified active surveillance files on approximately 53,000 individuals. However, the program had the capacity to monitor many more, and there's evidence it was expanding rapidly. What kinds of people were being targeted? Marcus pulled up a prepared chart on the hearing room's display screens. The targets included journalists, federal judges, members of Congress, civil rights activists, union leaders, business executives, and military personnel. Essentially, anyone who might potentially oppose or investigate government overreach. The revelation sent murmurs through the packed hearing room. Several committee members looked genuinely shocked at the scope of the surveillance. Colonel Parker testified later that same day, wearing his full military dress uniform. His presence commanded respect from both committee members and spectators. His testimony focused on the organizational structure of the conspiracy and the methods used to hide it from legitimate oversight. This was not a rogue operation by a few bad actors, Parker stated firmly. This was a systematic effort by high-level officials across multiple agencies to create an intelligence apparatus outside constitutional constraints. Senator Williams from Texas asked, Colonel Parker, how was such an extensive operation able to avoid detection by existing oversight mechanisms? Sir, they placed their people in key oversight positions and used legitimate budget lines to fund illegitimate activities. They also compartmentalized information so that most participants only knew about their specific piece of the operation. What's your assessment of the long-term threat this kind of operation poses to American democracy? Parker's expression was grave. Senator, if this program had continued to operate undetected, it would have eventually given a small group of unelected officials the ability to blackmail and control elected representatives, federal judges, and members of the press. That's not intelligence gathering. That's the foundation of authoritarian control. The hearings revealed new shocking details almost daily. Rebecca Stone's continued investigative reporting had uncovered financial records, showing that the surveillance program had cost taxpayers over $400 million over 3 years. Money that was supposed to fund legitimate counter-terrorism operations had been diverted to spy on American citizens. Even more disturbing was evidence that the program had been used to influence policy decisions. Several members of Congress testified that they had received anonymous packages containing embarrassing personal information shortly before key votes on intelligence funding and oversight measures. Judge Patricia Coleman, a federal appeals court judge, testified about receiving veiled threats related to her rulings on surveillance cases. I was told that my personal security might be at risk if I continued to rule against government surveillance programs. At the time, I thought it was related to foreign threats. Now I realize it was domestic intimidation. The public reaction to these revelations was intense and divided. Protests demanding accountability filled the streets of major cities. Counter-protests argued that the surveillance was necessary for national security. Social media platforms became battlegrounds between those calling the whistleblowers heroes and those labeling them traitors. Marcus found himself at the center of this national debate. His company, Dataflow Industries, had become both famous and infamous. Some customers praised him for exposing government overreach, while others canceled contracts, fearing association with someone who had challenged intelligence operations. The financial impact was severe but manageable. Marcus had lost about 30% of his government contracts, but new business from companies concerned about surveillance had partially offset those losses. More importantly, several major technology companies had reached out to discuss partnerships for developing privacy-protecting technologies. Sarah Martinez had become something of a celebrity in the cybersecurity community. Her technical analysis of the surveillance methods had been published in multiple academic journals and led to speaking engagements at conferences around the world. She was also consulting with other companies to help them detect unauthorized use of their systems. Colonel Parker faced the most personal consequences. His military career was effectively over, though he had avoided court-martial thanks to whistleblower protections. He had been forced into early retirement and was now working as a consultant on intelligence oversight issues. Any regrets? Marcus asked during one of their regular meetings at the same diner where they had first planned their investigation. Parker stirred his coffee thoughtfully. About exposing the conspiracy? None whatsoever. About the personal cost? Some days, yes. I gave up a career I loved to do what was right. But when I see the reforms being implemented because of what we did, I know it was worth it. The reforms Parker mentioned were substantial and ongoing. Congress had passed the Surveillance Accountability Act, requiring judicial approval for any domestic monitoring programs and creating independent oversight boards with real enforcement power. The Inspector General's investigations had led to criminal charges against 14 officials, including Deputy Director Harrison. Harrison's trial had become a media circus. His defense team argued that he was acting to protect national security and that his surveillance targets were legitimate threats to American interests. The prosecution countered that he had violated his oath of office and betrayed the constitutional principles he was sworn to defend. Rebecca Stone continued to break new stories related to the scandal almost weekly. Her investigation had expanded to examine similar programs in other countries and their connections to the American operation. She had won a Pulitzer Prize for her reporting and had written a best-selling book about the investigation. The scary thing, Rebecca said during a television interview Marcus watched, is that this program might never have been discovered if Marcus Chen hadn't noticed those unusual data patterns. How many other illegal surveillance operations are out there that we haven't found yet? It was a question that haunted Marcus. His company now employed a team of analysts whose job was specifically to monitor for signs of unauthorized surveillance activities in their systems. He had also established a secure whistleblower portal where other technology companies could report suspicious government data requests. The international implications of the scandal were still unfolding. Several allied countries had launched their own investigations after evidence suggested their intelligence services had shared information with the American surveillance program. European Union officials were considering new regulations on data sharing with American intelligence agencies. Marcus received a call from an unexpected source one evening while working late in his office. The caller identified himself as a former NSA analyst who had quit his job after the scandal broke. Mr. Chen, I want you to know that there are a lot of people in the intelligence community who are grateful for what you did. We joined these agencies to protect America, not to spy on Americans. Your investigation gave us hope that the system can still work. Thank you, Marcus replied. That means a lot. But I'm also calling to warn you. Not everyone in the intelligence community feels the same way. There are people who think you and Colonel Parker damaged national security. They may not be able to retaliate officially anymore, but that doesn't mean they won't try other methods. Marcus felt a familiar chill. What kind of other methods? Economic pressure, social ostracism, harassment of family members. Nothing directly traceable back to them, but enough to make your life difficult. Just be careful and trust your instincts if something feels wrong. After hanging up, Marcus looked out his office window at the city lights below. The conversation reminded him that their victory was not complete and might never be. Exposing one conspiracy didn't eliminate the conditions that had allowed it to exist in the first place. His secure phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. Marcus, I'm picking up some unusual network probes on our servers. Nothing like the previous surveillance, but someone is definitely testing our security. We should meet tomorrow to discuss enhanced protective measures. Marcus sighed, realizing that the price of exposing corruption was eternal vigilance. They had won a battle, but the war for government accountability and constitutional protections would continue for years to come. Still, as he prepared to leave his office, Marcus felt a deep satisfaction. They had taken on one of the most powerful and secretive parts of the government and won. They had proven that ordinary citizens could still hold their government accountable, even when that government tried to operate in the shadows. The real test would be whether the reforms they had fought for would survive future attempts to circumvent them. 1 year after the surveillance scandal first broke, Marcus Chen stood before a packed auditorium at Georgetown University, delivering the keynote address at a conference on digital privacy and government accountability. The audience included journalists, academics, technology executives, and government officials from around the world. "The question I'm asked most often," Marcus began, "is whether we would do it all again, knowing the personal and professional costs. The answer is absolutely yes. But I hope we've learned enough from this experience that future whistleblowers won't have to take such risks to expose government overreach." The reforms implemented in the wake of the scandal had been more comprehensive than anyone had expected. The new oversight mechanisms were working, with the Independent Surveillance Accountability Board conducting regular audits of intelligence operations and publishing quarterly reports on their findings. Several other questionable programs had been discovered and shut down through these audits. Harrison's trial had concluded 3 months earlier, with his conviction on multiple charges, including conspiracy, abuse of power, and violation of civil rights. He had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. 6 other officials had received similar sentences, while several more had accepted plea bargains in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations. The financial impact on data flow industries had stabilized and even turned positive. Marcus's company had become a leader in privacy-protecting data processing technologies, with clients specifically seeking them out because of their proven commitment to detecting and preventing surveillance abuse. Revenue was now 30% higher than it had been before the scandal. More importantly to Marcus, his company had become a model for corporate responsibility in the digital age. Several other technology companies had adopted similar monitoring systems to detect unauthorized government surveillance in their networks. An industry-wide coalition had formed to share information about suspicious data requests and to provide mutual support for companies facing pressure to cooperate with questionable intelligence operations. Sarah Martinez had left Dataflow to start her own cybersecurity consulting firm, specializing in helping organizations protect themselves from surveillance overreach. Her company was booming, with clients ranging from news organizations to human rights groups to foreign governments concerned about American intelligence operations. Colonel Parker had found new purpose as director of the Citizens Oversight Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to monitoring government intelligence activities and supporting whistleblowers. His military background and intimate knowledge of intelligence operations made him uniquely qualified to spot potential abuses before they became widespread. Rebecca Stone had won every major journalism award for her coverage of the scandal and had been promoted to chief investigative correspondent at the Washington Herald. Her book about the investigation, Shadow Government, had spent 40 weeks on the bestseller list and had been optioned for a movie adaptation. But the most significant change was in public awareness and engagement with surveillance issues. Polling showed that 67% of Americans now believed government surveillance had gone too far, compared to 32% before the scandal. Congressional representatives found themselves facing informed questions about intelligence oversight at town halls and public forums. However, not everything had gone smoothly. The intelligence community had pushed back hard against the new oversight measures, arguing that they were hampering legitimate national security operations. Some terrorism investigations had been delayed by the new approval processes, leading to criticism from security hawks in both parties. Marcus had also faced personal consequences that continued to affect his daily life. His family had received threats serious enough to require private security for several months. His children had been moved to a private school after incidents of harassment at their public school. The stress had contributed to his divorce, though. He and his ex-wife remained on good terms and shared custody of their children. During the question and answer session after his Georgetown speech, a young journalism student asked, Mr. Chen, some critics say that your investigation damaged America's ability to detect real terrorist threats. How do you respond to that? Marcus had heard this criticism many times and had developed a standard response. The surveillance program we exposed was not targeted at foreign terrorists. It was monitoring American journalists, judges, and politicians. Shutting down that program didn't make us less safe from terrorism. It made us safer from authoritarianism. ND. Older man in the audience raised his hand. But surely there must be some middle ground between no surveillance and the kind of abuse you uncovered. How do we find that balance? That's exactly the right question, Marcus replied. The oversight mechanisms we helped create are designed to find that balance. Intelligence agencies can still conduct necessary surveillance with proper judicial approval and congressional oversight. What they can't do anymore is spy on Americans in secret without any accountability. After the conference, Marcus met with Colonel Parker and Rebecca Stone for dinner at a restaurant near the university. It had become an annual tradition for the three of them to get together on the anniversary of their first meeting at the Riverside Diner. Any regrets? Rebecca asked, echoing the question Marcus had asked Parker a year earlier. Marcus considered the question carefully. I regret the personal cost to my family. I regret that it took a crisis to implement reforms that should have been in place all along. But I don't regret exposing the conspiracy. The alternative was to let it continue and grow until it fundamentally changed the nature of American democracy. Parker raised his glass. To the Constitution, and to ordinary citizens who refuse to let extraordinary circumstances justify abandoning our principles. They clinked glasses. Three people who had risked everything to protect something they believed was more important than their personal comfort or security. As they parted ways that evening, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just 2 years. The surveillance scandal had awakened something in the American public, a recognition that freedom requires vigilance and that citizens cannot simply trust their government to police itself. The reforms they had fought for were holding, but Marcus knew they would face future challenges. There would always be people in positions of power who would argue that extraordinary circumstances required extraordinary measures. There would always be pressure to trade freedom for the promise of security. But there would also always be people willing to stand up and say that some things are too important to compromise. People like Sarah, who continued to develop new technologies to protect privacy. People like Parker, who used his expertise to watch for signs of future abuse. People like Rebecca, who kept digging for truth even when powerful interests wanted it buried. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Mr. Chen, I work for a major social media company. I think we need to talk. I've discovered something you need to see. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a familiar mixture of dread and determination. Just when he thought they had solved one problem, another would emerge. The price of freedom, he had learned, was not just eternal vigilance, but the willingness to act on that vigilance even when it was personally costly. He typed back, when and where? Because some fights are too important to walk away from, even when you've already won once. The work of protecting democracy never ends. It just passes from one generation of citizens to the next, each facing their own tests of courage and principle. Marcus looked up at the stars visible above the city lights, thinking about his children and the country he hoped to leave them. A country where government served the people, not the other way around. A country where truth could still triumph over power, even when the odds seemed impossible. It wouldn't be easy. It never had been. But it was worth fighting for. His phone buzzed again. Tomorrow night, same place where this all started, the Riverside Diner, 8 o'clock. Marcus smiled grimly and headed home, already mentally preparing for whatever new challenge awaited. Some battles you fight for victory. Others you fight because they're worth fighting regardless of the outcome. This fight, the fight for government accountability and constitutional protections, would continue as long as there were people willing to take risks for principles larger than themselves. And Marcus Chen, CEO turned whistleblower turned guardian of democracy, was ready for whatever came next.